Chester had an angry look on his face as he entered his small house and slammed the front door. His mom, Deborah, called to him from the kitchen. Honey, is that you? What are you doing home so early? Chester didn't answer, but walked straight into the living room and collapsed into the recliner. An empty playpen sat in the middle of the room, which also had a large entertainment center and a round glass coffee table in front of a gray sofa. His father, a large, muscular man named Graham Manley, sat in a wheelchair next to the sofa. He slowly turned his head to look at Chester and nodded. Chester waved to him as he settled back in the recliner. Deborah entered, drying a dish. A little younger than Graham, Deborah was slender and blonde, with short, curly hair. What are you doing home, honey? I just put Willie down for his nap. She stared at Chester. Suddenly she realized. Oh, no. Not again. How could you lose your job again? What's the matter with you? The remote control sat on the end table next to the recliner. Chester pushed a button on it, turning on the TV. Walking over to him, Deborah grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. Oh, no, you don't. We're going to talk about this. Chester got up out of the chair and started to leave the room. Deborah called after him. Don't you dare walk away from me. Chester stopped and turned. Don't yell, Mom. You're going to wake Willie. Willie, yeah, Willie. Do you think about him while you lose job after job? Huh? Do you? Or your father and the cost of his treatments and medicines? And the rent for this house? How can we pay for all these things when you're out of work most of the time? We can barely afford this place. Chester shrugged his shoulders and turned to continue walking away from her. Chester, I'm talking to you. He stopped again. There's nothing to say, Mom. The bank got robbed, okay? I had the criminals stopped until one of them knocked me down and landed on top of me. He must have weighed less than 100 pounds. I couldn't get up. Chester turned to resume walking down the hall. Where are you going? Demanded Deborah. To use the bathroom and go to my room. Deborah's compassionate eyes followed him as he left the room. She sighed and shook her head. Chester entered the bathroom. Beside the toilet was a steel weight which read 100 pounds. One end of a short rope was tied to a loop on the top of the weight. The other end of the rope was tied under the lid of the toilet seat. Chester easily picked up the weight with one hand and placed it on the toilet tank. As he did so, the rope raised the toilet seat and lid. After using the bathroom, Chester went to his room. Pictures of toys he received as gifts for Christmases and birthdays decorated the walls. Since he couldn't play with toys, his mom always donated his gifts to charities, except for the toys he received for his 10th birthday. Those gifts were returned to the store for a refund. His mom used that money to help pay family bills. Even though he couldn't keep his toys, Chester enjoyed looking at the pictures of them his mother tacked on the wall after each birthday and Christmas. As Chester walked to his dresser, he looked at some of those pictures. Pictures of Legos, board games, play weapons, toy ships, footballs, basketballs, baseballs, puzzles, and action figures. When he reached his dresser, Chester opened the middle drawer. It was full of yo-yos, the one toy he kept. There were many different types and sizes, from small and round to large and octagon. Some were plastic and machine-made, others wooden and hand-carved. Colors included blue, green, yellow, brown, charcoal, black, swirls of orange and purple, rainbow patterns, and of course his favorite, red. Chester stared at the yo-yos. He touched some of them, running his fingers over the yo-yos and their strings. He stopped and closed his eyes. Please, God, please, just once. He sighed and took hold of his favorite, a hand-carved red one. Although he tried to pick it up, it wouldn't budge. Chester didn't give up, though. He used both hands and lifted with all his strength, grunting mightily as his face turned bright red. Arrgh! The yo-yo refused to budge an inch. Frustrated, Chester let go and slammed the yo-yo drawer shut. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He heard Willie cry out from the nursery next door and realized he had accidentally woken his baby brother. Wiping his eyes and face, he left his room. Chester walked into the nursery. There was a rocking chair in the room, and wallpaper with colorful cartoon animals decorated all four walls. Willie looked at Chester through the bars in his crib, laughed, and reached out for Chester to lift him. Chester's smile turned into a sad frown. I'm sorry, buddy. I can't. Willie smiled, continuing to reach out to be picked up. Chester sighed. If only I could make you understand why Dad and I can't pick you up. Willie started to cry, upset that Chester wouldn't pick him up. Hopelessly, Chester looked around the room. Against one wall was another 100-pound weight, this one tied to a longer rope that was not attached to anything. Chester walked over to the weight and easily picked it up with one hand. Keeping both the weight and the rope in his hand, he was able to wrap the rope around and under the crib. Then he tied the entire crib up in a bow. Chester looked down at Willie, still crying and reaching to be picked up, and lifted the entire crib up in the air. Looking up at Chester, Willie finally stopped crying. He gurgled, smiled, then started to cry again. Shh, shh. I know it's not the same, buddy, but it's the best I can do. I'm sorry. He gently swayed the crib from side to side as he sang, Rock-a-bye baby in the treetop. Willie stopped crying and looked up at Chester. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. Chester didn't notice the bowl was slowly becoming undone. He kept singing, When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall. On the last word, the knot became untied. The weight dropped to the floor as the crib fell out of Chester's arms. Hearing Willie scream, Deborah burst into the room. Oh my goodness, what happened? Willie was lying in his crib, now sobbing loudly. Chester let go of the crib and Deborah picked up Willie, holding him in her arms. Shh, shh. It's okay, sweetie. Mommy's here. Mommy's here. Willie quickly calmed and stopped crying. Deborah turned to Chester. What happened? Chester stared at the floor. Taking a closer look at the crib and weight, it didn't take Deborah long to figure out what had happened. What are the rules? She demanded. I just wanted. What are the rules? She repeated. Chester sighed. No tying weights to the baby. Or anything the baby is in. He walked over and sat in the rocking chair. Mom, I want to go to school. I'm sorry, honey, said Deborah, but you can't. One of us has to work and the other has to take care of Daddy and Willie. And you know you can't take care of Daddy and Willie, interrupted Chester, because almost everything I need to do for them means I have to lift things that weigh less than 100 pounds. But I can't hold down a job because sooner or later I'll need to pick up something that weighs less than 100 pounds too. Deborah cradled Willie in one arm and walked over to Chester. She ran her fingers through his hair. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. You know I wish it could be different. But you know how proud I am of you, don't you? Doing jobs most adults can't do. And in a few years, you won't want to play with toys, and you'll see that lifting heavy things will come in much handier than it does now. You'll be a real lady killer when the time comes, too. She smiled at him. Chester looked up at his mom and smiled back. Thanks, Mom. He got up and hugged her. Even though she weighed over 100 pounds, he pretended he was trying to lift her but couldn't. She always liked this game. Grrr, I can't lift you up. Deborah smiled. I guess I am still my petite, youthful self and weigh under 100 pounds. Chester nodded. I guess so. He didn't know why, but for some reason mothers always wanted to be younger than they were and weigh less than they did.